Hey everyone, David C. Anderson here, coming at you from the Knife Center. And if I could only have 5 knives for the rest of my life, and they had to be from one brand, Spyderco, this is what my top 5 Spyderco knife collection would look like. Let's check it out. So the point of this exercise is to look at one brand's complete lineup and see how well it can actually serve the broadest possible category of usages. For me, that being the caveat, everyone's uses are going to be different, everyone's needs are going to be different. But for me, if I could only have 5 knives, as mentioned, excluding my kitchen knives and multi-tools out there, what I would need to get through life is a full-size folding knife for bigger work, an everyday 3-inch pocket knife, a formal knife for those times I get to pretend I'm a gentleman, a fixed blade belt knife for outdoor and camping uses, and a bigger fixed blade for chopping and splitting, typically in a camping scenario for me as well. So let's go through and see what Spyderco has to offer. I've narrowed things down here to kind of a top 3 in each, and I'm gonna make my final decisions as we go. Starting off, we're gonna start off with fixed blades this time, as opposed to the folders, because the folders are a little more difficult this time around. Spyderco has a lot of interesting overlap in their lineup, which makes things interesting. But starting with the large fixed blade for camping use, it's real easy because there's only actually one real option in the lineup these days, and that is the Respect Bowie. Comes in about $431, 8-inch CPM 154 blade, made in Golden, Colorado. And this is not quite perfect, quite honestly, for what I need in that scenario. This is, a fighting knife. This is a true, mission appropriate Bowie knife, which was originally a fighter. It is thick enough. I could baton wood with it, I could split. It doesn't have the balance it needs to kind of chop through smaller pieces of wood. This is more a knife that is intended to move and strike quickly, as opposed to with a lot of chopping force. So this is by default what I'm gonna go with. It is a very nice knife. It just doesn't quite fill the role I'm looking for it to fill. You've got a cross guard on here, provides plenty of protection. The nice thing is, I would be able to mod these things, of course. So I'd probably minimize this back guard a little bit so I could choke up, especially into that ricasso area on the blade, without that getting in the way so much for finer work. G10 handles are nice. We've got a full tang, but it is enveloped right around the edges by the G10, so fewer instances of seams there means fewer instances of hot spots, hopefully, as well. Really, really nice overall, fantastic package. And because it's a little bit on the smaller side for most choppers anyway, there is that nimbleness due to its fighting nature that's gonna work well for smaller use when choking up. And therefore, that is gonna inform the smaller belt knife that I pair with this blade, since it can be kind of complementary to it. All these things need to be complementary to each other. Let me talk about the sheath real quick, haven't done that. It is leather, several layers thick. We have belt pass through here on the back for horizontal or vertical carry, and a peg with leather retention loop on the top. Now that would, this came up when we did our Boker collection video, if I removed a bit of that guard there at the back, that would make that strap a little less usable. But hey, maybe I'll make a custom sheath for it or have one made anyway. So that's my big fixed blade. So for my smaller or standard sized belt knife that I want to carry out camping, the things it would need to do primarily for me are small around the camp tasks, such as whittling, cutting string, carving a little bit of wood there, possibly some food prep, hopefully some food prep actually as well. Not a dedicated kitchen knife style of thing, but I ought to be able to cut some onions and potatoes and that sort of thing with it. The outdoorsiest thing in Spyderco's lineup right now that would fit this kind of size is, of course, the Moran Hunters, the Bill Moran designed handles right here, which are super, super comfortable. Not a huge grip on these, as should be mentioned. It is kind of a 3.5 finger grip. You can choke up, however, into the ricasso of the blade right there, but my fingers are starting to touch the back edge of that blade. I'm not super happy with that. I am super happy with the rest of the blade, however. Price on this knife, I should say, is about 121 bucks and some change. Just under 4 inches long on the blade, full flat ground, VG10 steel, not super thick. It's about 3/32 of an inch or so. Really, really slicey. This is gonna cut your spuds and onions real nicely. It's gonna skin and slice really nicely. And the handle is comfortable enough that you could carve with it, certainly. I would want a little more close to the edginess going on, but hey, maybe I mod that a little bit too. Should hold this in the left hand as well, equally comfortable. I mean, just check out that handle. It is so nice. Just nestles into the palm so nicely. Sheath on this knife is this it? Yes, I believe so. Yep, simple Kydex style, or maybe it's Bolter-on, I'm not sure. Spyderco's G-clip on the back. Easy on and off the belt when you want it to be, but not when you don't want it to be. Really nice. Other options that aren't strictly outdoorsy, but I think could still fill the role. The Enough 2 is a knife I happen to be very fond of right now. 168 for the VG10 versions. K390 is also available with a lot more edge retention at the trade-off of the rust resistance that VG10 brings to the table, of course. Thinner handle scales, but a decent shape overall. The bidirectional texturing there adds a lot of traction, surface area, and grip. Bit of a plus when you're doing things that are wet or bloody or require a lot of grimy work. Bit of a downside if I'm going to be doing a lot of carving, however. Not just because of the extra traction, but because of the extra, or the slightly thinner nature there as well. It's not going to work as long, as hard, I think. I do like it though. Very nimble blade, 4 inches, just under 4 inches here as well. VG10, more sharpened edge than the Moran, as you can see right there, despite nearly identical blade lengths, but a full-size handle grip without the usage of the ricasso right there, at least for my hands. Your mileage may vary, of course. Sheath here is, I think this is injection molded, right? This isn't Kydex, correct. This is an injection molded sheath. It has this thing. There we go. That will loosen up a little bit over time, but leather over the post. Not that I think it really needs it, it's just extra peace of mind because it does click into the sheath quite nicely. G-clip on this as well. And thirdly, the Street Beat, Fred Perrin design, has a lot going for it too, for this roll, I think. 121 and some change, 3.5 inch VG10 blade, full flat grind. Less blade overall than either of these other two, significantly less feeling than the Enough. Handle feel, however, is more substantial than the Enough, for me anyway. I can get all 4 of my fingers on it too. It's not a 3.5 finger grip, and very controllable, full flat grind, a little bit thicker than either of these two knives. So you have a little more strength perhaps, at least if you're sticking with just the VG10 versions on these. And sheath, kind of the same deal, injection molded, G-clip on the back. Well, I talked about the handle feel overall between these two. I'm going to take the Enough 2 off the table to start out with, because even though I can get a full-handed grip on it that I can't on the Moran, the thinness here for the task I'm thinking of this knife for, that's going to kind of affect it too much for me. Either one of these two handles is going to be more effective for this roll. Let's grip them both. I love the ergonomics of the Moran. I love the pinch point here. Overall, all the control surfaces that you're touching are fantastic. I like the Street Beat too. Let's see, if I went with this, it might be a better complement to the Respect, just due to the fact that the Respect is fairly nimble when you get up into that ricasso area. This would make a real nice ultra. Both of these actually would, smaller ones would make nice kind of ultralight fixed blades for hiking. The Street Beat would make a nice everyday carry too, maybe a little better than the Moran. I'm gonna go with the Street Beat for those reasons that I mentioned, as well as the fact that you've got more substantial finger guard protection on this, which I happen to like. There's my outdoor combo from Spyderco. You got your Street Beat and the Respect buoy, both of them tactical knives, both of them not designed as outdoor knives, but they're versatile enough they could pull it off. So that's what I'm choosing. Going for it. Next up, I'm going to do the gentleman's knife category next, because for reasons that will become clear shortly. First, the chaparral, always a nice choice. This version I really like with the Raffir Noble handles. I think it looks super nice. You've also got, for the classier handle options, you've got a bird's eye maple as well as a carbon fiber. And then there's like G10 and FRN models if you don't want this knife as a kind of Gen-C knife, formal knife. There are those less fancy versions. Blade length is 2.8 inches, CTS XHP steel, and very, very thin. This might be the sliciest standard sized folder in Spyderco's lineup. I mean, that is just a little laser beam. Deep carry clipper, almost deep carry I should say. The wire pocket clip always looks nice and classy from the outside, and it is reversible. Mid-mounted lockback is also lefty or righty friendly, and that thumb hole makes them easy to open. Signature Spyderco element. Another signature Spyderco element here, the finger choil, which allows, despite a small knife, this small overall blade size, I can get a full 4-finger grip on this knife too. And yet it doesn't feel like a big, bulky thing, which is pretty cool. Next up, as a possibility, our exclusive Pack-A-Wood handled versions of the Delica. Kind of some of the same things that make the chaparral very good, make this very good as well. $155, just about $156 for these right now. The wood handles, it's Pack-A-Wood, it's classy, it feels old school, but it's way more stable than natural wood because this is using wood veneers sandwiched together and essentially flooded with epoxy to keep them nice and stable, which is pretty cool. 4-position pocket clip here, more shiny spoon style clip. Mid-mounted lockback as well. You have the David Boy dent on this one, which makes it possibly a little harder to disengage accidentally and also a little easier to find without looking at it, which is nice. Compared between the two, you've got a full 4-finger grip on the knife without the use of a choil. To do that with the chaparral, I need to get up into the choil area. Sharpened edge between the two, you got a tiny bit more on the Delica, not a huge amount. And this Delica, speaking of the blade, is laminated. You've got a center core of HAP 40, nice powder metallurgy tool steel there with some stainless outer layers. It's very cool indeed. Oh, I almost went for a choil there that is not in fact there. So closed, if we look at the differences between these, like I said, you've got a full 4-finger grip on the Delica without the use of a finger choil and more sharpened edge, so it is slightly bigger in the pocket. Last possibility for the formal knife, I went with the Akuchi. For this one. A bit out of left field for me. A trailing point blade is not what I usually gravitate to, but this is a pretty cool knife. Just over $170, 3¼ inch S30V blade, and that's usually about as big as I want to get on a gentlemanly knife. I don't want that to be too large. Full flat grind on this, G10 with carbon fiber laminate for the handles, and Spyderco's compression lock. First one of those signature things we've seen so far. Finger safe, fidget friendly. Finger safe I always just tend to, I like a lot because it's one less thing you have to think about. Just in case things are, adrenaline is flowing or you're not at your fullest capacity and you have to use a knife, one less thing to think about to try to avoid injury when you're using it. We've got the wire pocket clip here as well, and this is a flipper. So you've got quicker opening and closing action than either of these lockbacks we just looked at. All right, decision time between these three. There's a reason I don't usually, gravitate towards trailing points very often. I just find drop points to be more generally useful day to day. These are cool, but if I'm only limited to these, I'm going to take that off the table. All right, between the Delica and the chaparral, you've got better slicing geometry with the chaparral, the Delica, a little bit bulkier, and we're definitely getting into some things that have more heft to them. So I'm not so much worried about one being stronger than the other. It's a gut feeling. I'm going with the chaparral here. I like a drop point in general. You do have a little bit of drop to the Delica's edge here, which lets you do the things that I like having a drop point for. But I think the chaparral looks in profile a little less out there, a little more conventional, even though Spyderco's do have a distinctive look. And for something that is meant to be, you know, genteel, I like that. So Chaparral in Raffir Noble is going to be my formal knife. Now here's where things get interesting. I'm going to talk about the full-size folders and then the 3-inch folders together before making a decision, and you'll see why. Got to start with the Paramilitary 2. I mean, it is a classic for a full-sized Spyderco knife, and for good reason. I really like the Crewwear blade steel and canvas micarta handle combination right here, even though this version is not usable with a lot of the aftermarket stuff. If I wanted to go modding it after the fact, you're going to need to go with basically any of the other versions of the PM2 at that point. This one itself is about $203. The series starts, you know, mid 100s, so decent bit less than this one. Blade length 3.5, which is round about the length I want my full-size folder to be, or thereabouts, plus or minus a little bit. Full flat grind, a little bit thicker on the spine overall for some strength, but it tapers down pretty quickly to a very acute point. Can get all 4 of my fingers on the standard section of handle there. Maybe a tiny bit cramped, but I own and use a PM2 on occasion, and it's never been enough to get in the way. Works well, and then I can choke up for more. We've got a 4-position pocket clip and the compression lock. Not only is it finger safe as mentioned, but it's also a very strong lock. It's not just a liner lock on the back side or on the wrong side of the knife, quote unquote. You've actually got an interlocking tab that fits into a matching shape inside the tang of the blade. So you've got compression happening in several different directions to achieve the lockup. Very nice. Popular alternative to the PM2, and also another knife that I own an example of, the Manix 2. About the same overall dimensions, about the same overall length, about the same blade length, about the same sharpened length. PM2 has slightly more sharpened length than the Manix 2. But handle-wise, standard section likewise feels like just enough for me. You've also got the choke up point there on the finger choil and full flat grind, similar geometry but thinner to the PM2. So maybe not quite as strong outright, but also very slicey. 2-position pocket clip and the ball bearing lock. Operates similarly to something like Benchmade's Axis lock in that you grip it from both sides and you can flick the blade open and closed. But instead of a crossbar, you're dealing with an actual ceramic, I believe in this case, ball bearing pressed into the tang of the knife. So you've got something akin to an action that I'm very familiar with because you own and use many crossbar locking knives. So there's a feel of familiarity to this, even if it is slightly different. And third of all, the Caribbean is another one I'm a big fan of. Compression lock on this knife as well. Blade length here, 3.7, so definitely the largest of these 3. Price on this is about $228. The Manix, those start at about $150 for the G10 versions. I did mention that earlier. This is nice. Definitely more handle length than any of these, and more blade length and sharpened edge length than either of these, all without resorting to a choil. So you've got more blade length than the PM2 and significantly more sharpened edge, and then even more so than the Manix 2. But before I make a decision here, let's talk about the 3-inch everyday carry, which for me, I need a 3-inch knife for certain locations I go. I need to stay under that blade length. The Para 3, we have to start by talking about that. This is actually one of my go-tos that I reach for when I need to head to those certain locales. Not this one in particular, but this model. Just under 3 inches on the blade length. This one features a Maximet blade steel, which is super awesome stuff. It is quite expensive though. This is about a $250 knife compared to, starting around, well, about $125 for the injection molded versions, but the standard G10 versions start about $175. We've got a very similar kind of edge characteristic or edge geometry to the PM2. Thicker, but narrows down quite significantly and quite abruptly, very acute on the tip. Handle length, it's about a 3.5 finger grip for me in general, just in the standard handhold position. If I want a 4-finger grip, I will have to choke up into the finger choil area, at which point it feels plenty good for heavier cuts. Next up, we've got the Little Temperance 3, and this thing is pretty intriguing. $217 for this version with the K390 blade steel, which I'm a very big fan of. Holds an edge a real long time, pretty decently tough as well, and not entirely stainless, so that's the only kind of downside of it. VG10 versions of this start at about $176. So if you're comparing that version to a base Paramilitary 2, which both have injection molded handles, you've got BD1 on the Para 3, sorry, I meant Para 3. You got BD1 on the injection molded Para 3s, so it's like $50 more for the VG10 versions of this. These are gonna feel stronger because you've got full liners on both sides that the Para 3 lightweight does not have, and you've got a phenomenal feel in the hand. Let me hold this up next to the Para 3 right here. Same overall length, pretty much identical overall length. The Little Temperance 3 might be a millimeter smaller, but that could be production variances between one or the next. Full 4-finger grip without a finger choil, and as a result, more sharpened edge on this. A thicker blade to start with too. This is definitely a bit on the chunky side for a smaller everyday carry blade, and we'll get to more of that in a little bit too. But this feels really, really good. And last but not least, the Native 5, one of their all-time great everyday carry designs. It has been refined through 5 generations now at this point to just be oh so good. This one right here is really nice with the fluted carbon fiber handles. It's a little more contoured than some of the other versions. We've got S90V blade steel as well. Tons of edge retention right there. About 3-finger grip for the standard handhold, or a pretty good feeling 4-finger grip with the finger choil. All right, what are we gonna go with? Here's where the overlap starts to get interesting. I'm gonna take the Native 5 off the table first and foremost because it's similar enough to the Chaparral that I already know I'm gonna keep that I don't feel the need for this as well. This is gonna give me enough of that flavor, and it opens up one of these compression lock knives for the next. Now here's where these two sections really have to work together, the large and the small knife. And I really like the Little Temperance. I really like the Little Temperance. It offers just more of what I like about the Para 3 in the same kind of size, maybe slightly bulkier in the pocket, but I reach for the Para 3 when I want a 3-inch blade that can work like a little bit of a larger knife. The thing is though, does the Little Temperance 3 make sense with any of these knives? I'll tell you what I mean. Let me start with the Para 3. This is the fun, like, just rabbit hole thinking that we do around the office here these times. Full standard grip without using the finger choil here. Without any finger choil on the Little Temperance 3, I feel like I have slightly more grip. And I've certainly got a little more in the back half of the handle, which is where a lot of your grip strength comes from too. So the handle's a little more comfortable. Not as much reach when you're measuring tip to scale, but when you're talking sharpened edge, they are so close. Like maybe a 1/4 inch difference between the two, not huge. Not a huge difference, despite one looking significantly longer overall. That's interesting. The Manix 2, likewise, as I mentioned, it's a skosh smaller even than the Para 2. Look at that difference in blade length right there. Minor, in sharpened edge, I should say. Very, very minor. The Caribbean, definitely. You've got some separation there. In a way, these both being designed by Sal Glesser, of course, it makes sense that this would appear to be the case, but you can definitely see the design similarities between these two. Kind of one's a bigger version of the other in a way. These two would make sense together. But because I'm gonna have to go with the Little Temperance 3, I'm gonna take the Para 3 off because, again, like with the Native, the Chaparral fulfills the slightly smaller role. This is gonna be a great EDC option, even if I'm not being gentlemanly. So I like the fact that this 3-inch knife kind of spoils some bigger knives. As such, we're gonna have to trade some things out. It actually makes more sense to compare this or to take the Mannix 2 out, put the XL in the option book, and take the Paramilitary 2 out and put the new Military 2 on the table. Let's do that, shall we? Now, before anyone actually mentions the Shaman, because I know someone's in the comments section right now getting ready to do that, I have one here just by way of comparison. Blade thickness, little Temperance 3 is a tiny bit thicker, and sharpened edge, let's do that same thing. Barely any more. This 3-inch knife spoils a lot of Spyderco's 3.5-inch knives in terms of capability. At least it feels that way right now. That's pretty cool. All right, let's compare these to these other two now. Are we in the weeds enough yet, Thomas?
They've been up for a while.
Probably. Here it is against the Military 2. This actually feels like a bigger knife. It's a worthy step bigger than the little Temperance 3. Plenty of handle length there, certainly very generous. Also a finger choil for even more generosity. Very downturned blade. It's going to point really naturally. It's going to work on a cutting board really naturally if I wanted to use this for food prep. Not that I probably would, but it is there. So that's pretty cool. Mannix 2 XL. Definitely feels like a bigger knife here as well. Definitely more sharpened edge. S30V on this version, on both of these two new knives actually. Interesting thing about the Mannix 2 XL is it doesn't really feel like it has more handle than the Mannix 2, the non-XL version. The profile, if you stack the Mannix up on it, it just comes down a little farther. You don't actually get really much more length unless you choked back behind the beak right there. So your standard grip actually feels very similar to a standard Mannix 2, just with a little more beak on the end. Very interesting. In the end, I think it's definitely got to come down to the feel in the hand between these three, because when you're just limited to these, kind of that ergonomic agreeableness is going to be more and more important than other things like the blade steel that's available, maybe even in some cases the blade shape. I do like a drop point though, so let's see. Military 2. Great knife. Really cool that they've brought the compression lock over to this model. It's a lot of knife. Certainly is. Fold it up. There you go. Mannix 2 XL. Feels pretty good. You get a lot of traction from the jimping on these knives. Caribbean. Feels pretty good. All right, before we make a final decision, like I said, I do like a drop point. So let's see if we can narrow it down to one of these two drop point models here. More traction, I think, on the Mannix 2 XL. Handle length, though, there's more on the Caribbean, and you've got more sharpened edge. Just a little bit. You know, it's not a huge amount difference, but you do have more sharpened edge because you don't have a choil there. I'm going to go with Caribbean over the Mannix 2 XL. All right, and then there were two. Final decision time. How does this feel cutting air, obviously? It's really apparent to me. To me, the Caribbean fits my hand just a little bit better. Your mileage may vary. In fact, it probably will. And that's not even me choosing that because it has a drop point versus the straight spine of the Military 2 right there. It feels better to me. So there's my lineup. Let's get this out of here. This awesome knife. Let's get it out of here. So my 5-knife collection would be the Respect Bowie. Made this like 3 inches longer. It might be better for my needs. But the Respect Bowie, the Street Beat by Fred Perrin for my fixed blade belt knife, as well as everyday carry option now due to the size. It's a good option. Chaparral for my gentleman's knife, as well as just a good smaller everyday carry. My 3-inch knife that can work like a much bigger knife is the little Temperance 3, and my bigger knife still that gives me just even more than is the Caribbean in the drop point shape, not the sheep's foot. There you go. That's my 5-knife Spyderco collection. What's yours? If you had to be restricted to just 5 pieces and they had to be from Spyderco, let me know what they are down below. And for the next issue or the next entry in this series, let me know what brands you would like us to check out next. If you want to get your hands on any of these knives that we looked at today, check out the links in the description. Those will take you to KnifeCenter.com. And don't forget about our Knife Rewards program, which lets you earn free money to spend on a future knife, sometimes 5% or even more when you buy one of these knives today. I'm David C. Anderson from the Knife Center. That's Thomas behind the camera. He did say something in this video. We're signing off. See you next time.